"You old hag with no money, you're in the way. We'll take all the inheritance. Get out now." Right after Dad's funeral, my brother's wife kicked Mom out. I couldn't believe what my sister-in-law had said. This was just too cruel. I was furious and about to lash out at my brother and his wife, but Mom stopped me. She whispered in my ear, "That girl, she's stunned for." I looked at Mom, confused, not understanding what she meant. "My name is Bonnie. I'm just an ordinary office worker at a small to medium-sized company. My family's home is a famous upscale restaurant in our hometown. When people find out, they're always surprised. They can't imagine someone as plain and unnoticeable as me being associated with fine dining. In reality, I have little to do with that restaurant now." My brother, Relay, followed in Dad's footsteps as a chef, and his wife, Alida, helped run the place. It's clear they will take over the restaurant, and there's no role for me. Dad was a chef and entrepreneur who made the restaurant famous in just one generation. In a word, he was a go-getter. He was tough at work, so I think it was hard on Mom, my brother, and his wife who worked with him. But away from work, Dad was a loving family man who made people laugh with his jokes. I loved Dad for that. Then one day, I got a call from Mom at work. "Your father has collapsed. Come to the hospital right away." I could tell from Mom's voice that Dad's situation was serious. I rushed to the hospital. When I arrived, Mom and the doctor were talking, looking very serious. "Mom, is Dad okay?" I asked after the doctor left, not knowing what was going on. Mom was looking worriedly at Dad, lying in bed and stroking his hand. His hands were thick and hard like a craftsman's. I love Dad's hands. "He's not in immediate danger, but it seems there will be after effects," Mom murmured, still looking at Dad. The doctor had told her that Dad would probably be paralyzed on his right side. Not being able to move his right hand would be the hardest thing for Dad. Mom and I sighed, unable to talk any further. "Is my father-in-law okay?" My sister-in-law's voice echoed in the quiet hospital room. She had rushed over after hearing from Mom. I thought she was worried, but as soon as she heard about Dad's condition and the after effects, her expression changed, and she began to smirk. "Well, he can't cook anymore, so the restaurant is ours now," she said callously. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. The sister-in-law I knew was quiet, never going against Mom, Dad, or my brother, always smiling, always considerate. But the person in front of me now was like a stranger. I couldn't keep up with her sudden change. "That's her true nature. She's been hiding it, I notice. But she's really wicked," Mom said, sighing. I was worried about Dad's condition, but my sister-in-law's behavior was so shocking that I left the hospital that day in confusion. 2 weeks later, Dad was discharged and returned home. Dad's body was now so frail that he couldn't even manage to go to the bathroom or eat on his own. Proud as he was, Dad would sometimes throw tantrums and throw things. Worried about Dad and Mom, who was taking care of him, I went back to my parents' house to help with caregiving whenever I had time. "You're coming back too often. It's annoying." My sister-in-law would make snide remarks every time she saw me, but that wasn't something I could worry about. Mom looked more worn out every time I saw her. She was taking care of Dad's toileting, meals, and baths all by herself, all day long, probably without any time to rest. Though they sometimes hired a helper, Mom's burden was still significant. My brother and sister-in-law, who lived with them, not only refused to help with Dad's care but also didn't even prepare Mom's meals. "Mom, you must be having a hard time alone. Should I quit my job and come back here, not just to help occasionally, but to take care of Dad together?" Since my brother and his wife were clearly unreliable, I had no choice but to help Mom. I seriously considered joining in Dad's caregiving, but even when I suggested it, Mom shook her head. "There's a helper, and I'm fine on my own. You don't have to worry about me," Mom answered with a smile, perhaps not wanting to worry me, but she looked like she was pushing herself too hard. I was driven by anxiety that Mom might collapse too. Then the situation took a turn for the worse. Dad, who had become quite disheartened, began to show symptoms of dementia. "Who are you?" Being told that by my own father was quite painful. He used to act so high and mighty, and now he doesn't even recognize his own daughter. How pathetic, my sister-in-law, who happened to peek into the room, sneered at me. Forgotten by Dad or not, her attitude on top of the shock I was already feeling hurt me even more. "Father-in-law smells a bit. If you want to stay in this house, you better behave." My sister-in-law, her face twisted, pinched her nose and looked at Dad with contempt. Mom completely ignored her. She was probably holding back from reacting to the provocation. My sister-in-law clicked her tongue and left the room. Dad, it's okay. Mom spoke to Dad in a gentle voice like soothing a child. Thinking about how my parents were being treated so roughly by my brother and his wife, I felt like crying. Dad's dementia continued to progress and his body weakened more and more. It was soon becoming impossible to care for him at home. As I pondered what to do with my parents, my brother, who rarely spoke to me even when I visited home, called me. I answered the phone and complained to him about his wife's attitude, but he brushed off my words and started talking about himself, saying it wasn't important. Then he asked me to help out at the restaurant on weekends. I thought it was very selfish of him, so I told him I would consult with Mom and get back to him, then hung up. I immediately called Mom and relayed the conversation with my brother to her. Mom then explained the reason my brother had asked for my help. The longtime employees and chefs are quitting one after another. Almost no one is left. They all say they can't keep up with the leader's way of doing things. I haven't been to the restaurant in a while, so I don't know the details. Mom was no longer involved in the restaurant's operations, but even while caring for Dad, she was concerned about it. It was a place they had worked hard to build together. There must be a strong attachment, and it was only natural to be concerned. She must also be worried about the employees with whom they had shared joys and sorrows. From Mom's voice, I could sense her disappointment that things had come to this. I'll go help out at the restaurant this weekend. I'll see for myself what's going on, so don't worry. After discussing it with my mom, we decided that Dad would go to daycare while I couldn't help with caregiving that weekend. I changed into an employee uniform in the locker room of my family's restaurant. How many years had it been since I last wore this uniform? I felt nostalgic, but looking around, I didn't recognize any faces. Young people who Dad would never have hired if he were still active, ones with piercings and conspicuous tattoos, were struggling in their unfamiliar uniforms as they carried food. The interior of the restaurant, which I hadn't visited in a long time, had changed significantly from my memory. I walked around the restaurant to regain my senses. Then, from a large space created by connecting several tables, I heard lively voices. Looking over, I saw my sister-in-law. She wasn't working but was having a banquet with about 30 women her age. My sister-in-law was sitting in the center of the table, happily guzzling wine. Ladies of my class, all our dishes are high-end and delicious. Today's my treat, so enjoy yourselves to the fullest. Truffles, foie gras, eat as much as you want. My sister-in-law, who seemed quite drunk, used an empty wine bottle as a microphone and said something outrageous. Tears erupted from those present. Elena, are you serious? Doing that will cause a huge deficit for the restaurant. I hurried over to my sister-in-law to stop her. She suddenly changed her cheerful face and glared at me. Shut up. A sister-in-law who can't even get married should keep quiet. This is my restaurant, so I can do whatever I want, she said, making a dismissive gesture to shoo me away. This is my parents' restaurant. I swallowed those words and left the table. The situation in the restaurant was dire. The kitchen was overwhelmed by the unreserved, all-you-can-eat orders from the group led by my sister-in-law, and they couldn't handle the orders from other customers. Regular customers from Dad's time were so angry that they left, saying, "How long are you going to make us wait?" I had never seen these customers angry before. Realizing how bad it was, I asked the chefs to put my sister-in-law's table on hold and suggested prioritizing the other customers, but they said they couldn't. My sister-in-law had told them to prioritize her table. If they didn't listen, they would be scolded later, the chef said, looking down. My brother was engrossed in a horse racing broadcast, seemingly oblivious to the chaos. He probably became a chef just by going along with the atmosphere around him. As soon as Dad, who was intimidating, was gone from the kitchen, this happened. Since childhood he had always watched Dad's face, and now that Dad was gone, he was watching Elita's face. This was not good. I approached the table again to warn my sister-in-law about the orders. Just then, a long-serving employee whom I knew was telling my sister-in-law, "We can't serve that dish anymore. We've run out of the main ingredient, truffles." The moment the employee bowed his head, my sister-in-law raised her voice in anger. "Then go buy some. You should know that much, you useless person." She even threw an empty plate at the employee. She was acting more like a rowdy, drunken customer than an owner. I understood why the long-serving employees had been quitting one after another. I'm thinking of changing the name of this restaurant. The current name is old-fashioned and cliché, I want something more stylish and cool. My sister-in-law turned to her friends, laughing and making such remarks. The restaurant was finished. Dad's once renowned establishment was nowhere to be seen. After finishing my help, I headed to the locker room, wondering how to tell Mom about this situation. She would surely be sad to know about this. Thinking so, my steps felt heavy as I headed home. The next day, when I visited my parents' house, I honestly told Mom about the situation at the restaurant. Mom sighed sadly. I thought it might be like that. My son has been under Elita's thumb since Dad fell ill, and the restaurant can't survive without your father. Tears welled in Mom's eyes, and her lips trembled. Seeing Mom like that, I couldn't hold back my tears either. I'm sorry. If I had been stronger, I could have protected Dad and Mom's restaurant. Mom patted my shoulder, saying it was okay. Let's give up on the restaurant. Mom persuaded me to do the same. After that, I continued to refuse my brother's requests to help at the restaurant. No matter how many times I refused, he kept calling, and his complaints about my sister-in-law began to mix into the conversation. She was still inviting acquaintances and treating them, and the restaurant was facing a huge deficit. They were even struggling to pay for supplies. Furthermore, despite having no money, my sister-in-law insisted on renovating the restaurant into a stylish cafe bar. That has nothing to do with me. I would hang up the phone in the middle of the conversation every time. They could do whatever they wanted with the restaurant. All I wished for was Dad and Mom to live a peaceful life. A few months later, Dad suddenly passed away from pneumonia. Many people came to the funeral of Dad, known for his kindness and inability to refuse requests. Mom greeted the condolence visitors with composure. You must be tired, mother-in-law. Please rest in the back. I'll take care of the guests. My sister-in-law asserted herself at times like this. She probably didn't like Mom taking charge of the funeral, wanting to show she was the face of the family. No, I'm in charge of the funeral, so I will properly greet everyone. Mom sternly rebuked her. Whether overwhelmed by Mom's forcefulness or not, my sister-in-law left the scene with a bitter face. Under Mom's direction, Dad's funeral proceeded smoothly. Chefs who had trained under Dad, familiar regular customers, and many people I knew came and encouraged Mom and me. They didn't even make eye contact with my brother and his wife. They all knew what my brother and his wife had been doing since Dad fell ill. Throughout the funeral, my brother and his wife looked uncomfortable. I wish they would just keep quiet, I thought as I looked at them. When all of your father-in-law's inheritance goes to us, you too should renounce your share. My sister-in-law approached us after the cremation as Mom held Dad's ashes, getting ready to leave. The shop, the house, the money, we'll take all the inheritance. It's only natural since we've been listening to that arrogant old man for so long. Her words were truly appalling. How much more could this woman belittle others after having relied on them for so long? You penniless old woman, you're in the wrong. You should leave the house right away. We're strangers now, so don't contact us. My sister-in-law bared her teeth at Mom too. I was so angry I felt like I was losing my mind. I almost grabbed my sister-in-law, but Mom held my arm and shook her head. It's okay, it's over now, Mom said, looking at me. My sister-in-law laughed and walked away. I felt like running after her and kicking her, but Mom was still holding my hand. When Mom couldn't see Aita anymore, she let go of my hand. Then she looked at my face and smiled. That girl, she's finished. I was puzzled by her words. Mom said nothing more and began to get ready to leave again. You'll understand in time, Mom said, holding Dad's ashes with her usual gentle smile. After that, Mom, who had been driven out of her home, has been living in my condominium. Surprisingly, Mom had saved a considerable amount of money in her name. It seems Dad had been paying Mom a substantial salary, and with that saved money as capital, Mom had been increasing her assets through investments like stocks. This place is too cramped. Let's buy a more spacious condominium, Mom said. She is currently looking for a property for the two of us to live in. 3 months later, a call came from my sister-in-law. Why didn't you tell me about father-in-law's debt? A scary debt collector is sitting in the shop. What are you going to do about it? She screamed as soon as I picked up the phone. Her voice was so loud that Mom, who was next to me, could hear everything. Hearing my sister-in-law's screams, Mom gave a mischievous smile and took the phone from me. Oh, Aita, it's been a while. Your father-in-law was too kind-hearted and became a guarantor for other people's debts. Before we knew it, the debt had grown to a huge amount. I've been repaying it until now, but it's your turn from now on. After all, you're taking all the inheritance, aren't you? Mom spoke with a chuckle. Even though she was laughing, her eyes were cold. Mom must have been harboring quite a bit of anger herself. Mother-in-law, I apologize for everything. Let's live together again and run the shop, please. My sister-in-law changed her attitude and begged. I couldn't believe she could say such a thing. I never want to deal with you two again. Mom's voice was colder than I had ever heard. She ignored my sister-in-law's screams and hung up the phone. Block her calls, please. Mom smiled as she handed the phone back to me. We had already purchased a new condominium and started our new life there. Of course, my brother and his wife don't know the location, so we'll probably never see them again. Later, through local acquaintances, I learned that my family's restaurant had closed. My brother and his wife had lost the shop and the house to debt and were left penniless. They still have remaining debts, so they are now working from morning to night at a chain restaurant in the old apartment where they live. The voices of the couple berating each other can be heard echoing. Meanwhile, Mom and I finished observing Dad's third death anniversary and dined at a restaurant opened by Dad's top disciple. The food tasted just like what Dad used to make. That night, we talked about memories of Dad and enjoyed a feast of gourmet dishes to our heart's content.